This is the Red Podcast.
This is episode number 93. We're talking about hiring your first employees, how to find people, how to hire them, and if you need to, how to fire them. That's coming up on this episode of Red Podcast.
This is the Red Podcast. Real entrepreneur development. Make more money, work less, and live a life of freedom. No BS advice that really works. Here's your hosts, David Hooper and Laurel Staples.
I had lunch at a Panera Bread today, more like a brunch. You ever been there?
I have. I think most people in America have.
How's that work with the gluten allergy?
It doesn't work so well when you're allergic to gluten these days. But when I wasn't, back in the day, I'd go and get their chocolate croissants that were fantastic.
I didn't even know that was on the menu.
Now you do.
No, I do.
So you can go back.
Well, I just had a grilled cheese, first thing that I saw. Full of fat, salt, probably sugar, and of course, gluten.
But it was delicious.
She asked me what I wanted to drink. I said, I don't know. You got smoothies, strawberry banana smoothie? She said, yeah, no problem. Have you ever seen the smoothies there? They serve them with these big fat straws.
Nope.
About as big as your thumb. And I had a flashback. I said, oh, I've been here before. I'd gone with a famous, I'll call him a rock god. We were driving around.
A rock god?
Yeah, he wanted to go to Panera.
What is a rock god, David?
Well, it's a guy that if I mentioned his name in the band he plays with, you would know who he is.
So he's a rock star.
Rock star, yeah.
Okay.
Or rock god.
Rock god.
Yeah, either one.
Okay.
One of those guys who takes like a 20-minute solo in the middle of the arena. Anyway, he made fun of me the whole time for getting this smoothie with the big fat straw. Very emasculating.
Huh. Something about big fat straws this guy doesn't like. Or was it the pink nature of the smoothie? We will never know.
I don't know. Maybe he's questioning everything. Maybe he liked it a little too much. Or maybe he was afraid that being seen with me, he wasn't going to get all those women that he's known for getting.
No. Maybe he was intimidated.
Anyway, other than that, the story has no point. Welcome to the Red Podcast. Red stands for Real Entrepreneur Development. We help you build an audience, sell more products, and make more money. This is the podcast for influencers. If you're looking to optimize your business, if you're looking to get the maximum money out of it while doing the same amount of work, this is the podcast for you. I've gotten a lot of emails, Laurel, at the Red Podcast email box. People are asking about hiring employees.
This is the time of year around the holidays where you do have to think about hiring more people. All the retail stores are hiring temporary employees. Your workload is increasing if you're in businesses that do more sales on the holidays. Or even if you're looking at the months to come, you might see that your sales are going to be taking off and you don't want to do all that work. You need a team to help you.
A team. I never use that word.
Team is the buzzword these days. My team, when they talk about their employees.
And I know why they do that. It's because it's like a big circle where everybody's singing Kumbaya and getting along, and you're just as important as the boss. I see why they're trying to do that. I think it comes off as egotistical. My team. Notice how they always have the my in it.
I disagree. I think team kind of has a camaraderie type feel to it. It's, hey, we're all in this together. We're all working together towards the same goal. I think it's kind of nice.
Here's my problem with it. When you call it a team, you refer to everybody as a team. A team works together, and I agree, your team should work together, but somebody's got to be the boss. I think that it's very, very important that if you're going to have a team, you realize that you are the boss. One of the biggest issues that I've faced, that I've seen people that I've worked with face, is that employees don't know what to do. You just expect them to know what to do. You expect them to work as hard as you are working, and that's just not the case. It doesn't happen. Somebody's got to lead these folks.
So if you were a basketball coach with a team, you wouldn't call your team my team? Would you call them my players?
The basketball coach is the leader. That's the leader.
True, but he has a team.
Well, I'm saying that why people use the word team in a non-team setting, in an office setting, is because they're trying to make it look like everybody's equal. And I don't think that everybody's equal. I think everybody has their specialty and they bring something to the table, but somebody's got to lead the folks.
All right. Well, we are not here to debate the meaning of team, But I like that you mentioned, David, about you hire people and you expect them to almost know what to do. This is what happens a lot of times with new entrepreneurs that are hiring their first employee is you hire somebody and you expect them not really to know what to do so much as you think they're going to work just as hard as you are. And you think they're going to solve problems like you solve problems and are going to have more of a sense of what you want out of them. This is something that I have found does not work. When I hired my first employee, what I didn't realize was I had to go from the role of entrepreneur, wearing all the hats in my business, to the role of manager. And honestly, this was years ago, 7+ years ago, I failed at that. I did not do well managing other people. They did not meet up to my expectations, probably because I didn't set my expectations. And there was a lot more work involved because I didn't do it the right way.
I've especially had that same issue when it comes to interns.
Oh, God, interns.
There's such a difference between interns and actual workers. The guys that are still in college and they're volunteering, let's call it volunteering, I guess that's what it is, getting experience and class credit in exchange for work. Man, those guys have to be told everything 99% of the time. 1%, they probably work pretty hard.
I had to fire an intern once. She was so bad. She would come in, I would list out what to do. Like, I would list out long-term goals. I would list out her daily goals. She couldn't do any of it. And I was going through the point of, is it me? Am I just being a terrible manager, not able to communicate? But I would look at my list and she was not able to check anything off the list. And so I had to call the school and I had to get rid of her. It was really bad.
Yeah. I've experienced that as well. But sometimes I think that it was me, especially back in the day before I knew how to give orders. As an employee myself at one time, I really hated it when people would tell me what to do. It's because I was a self-starter. It's because I should have been the boss, at least in my head. So I was very, very aware of that when letting people know what I wanted them to do. And what I mean by that is I wouldn't let them know what I wanted them to do. I just kind of expected them to read my mind. That never happened. And the results are awful because people want to be led. If you're not going to stand up and lead people, you're not going to have any success. So as we progress through this episode, talk about your first employees, talk about your first workers, know that you need to tell them what to do. And I'm saying this in a very nice way. They want to be told what to do. Otherwise, they're what I call free-range employees, just out there grazing, walking around, wait until they see the next thing that they may or may not do anything with.
Well, telepathy is not a strategy when you're hiring employees, nor is it a strategy in relationships. So I think you have to realize that unless you are being very clear on what to do and you're ready to manage employees, until that point, you probably shouldn't be hiring employees. But if you're ready at that point, what would be the first thing you would consider if you were rehiring your first employee again?
We've got an entire episode about working with freelancers from Odesk to Elance. If you go to redpodcast.com/93, we will have the show notes from this episode and a link to that. Because I think getting clear on giving direction, the best way to do it is with a single task freelancer. And that's very, very easy through a site like Odesk or freelancer.com or Elance.
So if you are ready to train and manage employees, David, what is the first step you would take if you were going back in time and could rehire your first employee?
You have to decide whether you want an on-site employee or an off-site employee. Typically, when we think about off-site people, we think about what they call virtual assistants, more of a freelancer type position, somebody in another country perhaps. But that can also be a traditional employee. I had one that I worked with for a number of years, about 8 years. My right-hand man, Wendy, was up in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. We worked together very, very well.
She was kind of a right-hand woman. Let's
she
be
was
honest
that too.
here.
Right and left hand, totally running the show.
You called her the boss, though, which is not even a team. It's like putting her above you. So
well, that's
going
when
to
we get to management. Yeah, well, We're going to talk about hiring people here in just a minute, and I'll tell the story of hiring Wendy and how she started working for me and how she eventually became the boss, because it's a good one. Before we get to that, though, do decide, do you want somebody on-site or off-site? On-site is going to offer you more control, but there is also the opportunity for distraction. There was one time I had an office here in Nashville, several employees, 3 or 4 employees in that office, and I wasn't getting anything done. So I went to the other end of what we call Music Row here in Nashville, set up another office, and that was my office, just me. Nobody was allowed. I don't even know if those guys knew where my office was. I just went to my office and let them work in their office because it was too distracting. As the boss, they were asking me everything that needed to happen. They were asking me for permission. And I said, look, just run with it. Run with it. Just you make the decision. We'll clean it up if it's a bad one. And trusting them was the best decision because it forced them to make better decisions. And the whole point of having employees is to free up your time.
At the same time, we just said you got to tell them what to do, and you're saying you kind of let them graze a little bit.
Well,
so where do you fall in there?
I told them what to do. Here's what you need to get done. Here are the goals, but how to do it, completely different.
Another thing you want to consider is, are you an introvert or an extrovert? And if you're an introvert, you might really want to have your employees on site because you like to interact with people, you like to be around them. For me in particular, that's not a great fit because I like to work alone. I get more done. Sounds like you do too, David, when you're alone. So that might be a consideration.
Yeah, if you're going to have somebody on site, that's definitely a consideration. Know that you need space for people to work, so you might have to get to a bigger office in order to accommodate them. You'll need equipment for them. Off-site, especially if they're acting in more of a freelancer type way, the space is included. They find their own space. The equipment is included. And there are varying options for that. You can, of course, buy space. You can buy equipment. Certainly on-site, though, they're going to expect a lot more from you on that.
When you're hiring off-site employees, David, what do you recommend, foreign versus domestic? Where do you really stand there?
It really depends on the job. If somebody's very specific in what he or she is doing, something like a programmer, web designer, sometimes those can be foreign. It doesn't necessarily matter if they've got the same level of English skills. For example, if English is your native language, that it would if somebody were a salesman, somebody who's got to get out, shake hands of people, be in your area. You're going to go for domestic, somebody who's local. Or maybe if they're on the phone, you could go for somebody who is far away, but also in your country, still speaks the language, still knows the culture. So it really just depends. Strangely enough, Wendy, who I've been teasing about, was foreign, but Toronto, Ontario, Canada, it's a very similar culture to the United States, and there are advantages of having somebody outside of the U.S. when it comes to taxes, bookkeeping, and just ease of getting somebody paid.
I think a good reason to hire somebody domestic would be if you're doing any sort of content creation where you need the person to speak the language, something like that. I would definitely go domestic on.
Absolutely. Any type of content creation, podcasting, writing, you really want a native speaker and you want somebody who knows the culture. It's not just being familiar with the language.
What about accounting? I know a lot of people hire freelancers for accounting, but if someone needed to hire an employee to do that and work out all the numbers, is that something you would do foreign or domestic?
Well, I think it depends. It depends. If you just want somebody to tabulate all your sales, you've got a lot of statistics that you need to plug into a spreadsheet, and that's their job, that's fine. Foreign person is going to be great for that, but if you're going to get into United States tax law, you probably want somebody here who, again, understands the culture, knows how we do taxes, can get Uncle Sam on the phone, dealing with it every day, day in and day out.
I've heard different approaches when it comes to hiring your first employee. I've heard, one, you should hire people that can do what you're not good at doing. So, for instance, if you're not good at accounting, at payroll, at social media, whatever that is, hire that out and focus on the things you are good at. On the other hand, that if you want to start hiring employees, that you should only hire out people that are going to add to the bottom line. So whatever work they do is going to cause your business to make more money, make more sales. Where do you stand on that, David?
Yeah, if you want to stay in business, you need to have somebody that's going to add to the business. You don't want somebody who's just going to take money from it. This isn't a charity. You want somebody who's going to bring in value and bring in something that you can sell.
Well, social media help for this example is value, but it might not be adding to your bottom line, or accounting might not add to your bottom line as if you hired a salesperson, for instance.
Well, is social media value? That's what you've got to get clear on. Is there a return on investment? I don't know. I don't know that there's not a return on investment, but if you are a brand new entrepreneur and if you are concerned about money, and a lot of brand new entrepreneurs are, if you're at the point where you're talking about first employees, which is the question that we were asked, I wouldn't just hire people for the sake of hiring them. I would hire somebody who's going to bring you more customers, hire somebody where you're going to be able to charge more money, hire somebody who's going to bring you more traffic, hire somebody who can help you convert that traffic, do something where you know that there's a good return on investment. And once you get more money coming in, that is when you can choose to kind of play around and see other things and have experiments.
Something that I think about when I hire people is hourly or salary based. And when I was first starting out and first hiring my first employee, that was something that was really kind of nerve-wracking for me, was to think about paying them a salary. So the first employees I had were hourly, and then I eventually had a salary employee, but that still made me a little nervous. Where do you feel like somebody who's hiring for the first time should be on the hourly versus salary?
I think salaried workers are the best for a couple of reasons. One, you know what you're getting into, but the party that you're hiring also knows what he or she is getting into. So you can budget, you know the amount of work that you're going to get. At the same time, an hourly employee, well, you might get off with paying a little bit less. And that can be good for certain types of jobs. You own a retail store, for example. Most of those employees are hourly employees. So that can be really good. It really just depends. Sometimes, though, when it's not like a retail store type operation, not a service type operation, let's say that I wanted to hire you for graphic design, I'm not sure if the job is going to take 10 hours, not sure if it's going to take 20 hours. Well, there's a huge difference. It's double the money. So when it comes to budgeting, having somebody on salary, that can be a lot better. And for something like graphic design, for the record, I would probably do just a flat fee, just do a work for hire. That doesn't have to be an hourly or salary person.
When you hired your first salary person, did that make you nervous at all? Like, maybe they're not going to do the work that I want them to do, even though I have to pay them every 2 weeks.
Well, that happened to me on the very first salary person that I hired. It was an overseas woman in Philippines. That was my own fault, though, because I was a free-range employer. Wasn't telling her what needed to happen and wasn't really familiar with the culture of Philippines and how virtual assistants worked, and I didn't know what she could do, and it was a real lesson for me. So, yeah, that can happen.
Did that end up being more work for you in the end?
I don't know if it really was more work. It was more money. It was lack of work that was the problem, because I wasn't doing anything. It probably would have been pretty bad if I'd actually done the work, and it might have been more work for me if I'd had to tell her exactly what I needed to do. But I think it was just a mismatch. That was not a good hire for me. I was just going for my team. I wanted to build my team, have the ego stroke, have somebody in the Philippines, have somebody to answer the phone anytime I called, anytime one of my customers called. So that was hiring for the wrong reason. And we can talk about hiring if you want to, talk about hiring good people, because I think that's half the battle.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I do want to reiterate a piece of advice you gave earlier, and I think a great way to start with hiring people is starting with a temporary project, is hiring somebody, see how you work with them, see how well you do communicating with them, get that done, and then consider taking them on an hourly or salary basis. But that kind of helps you get your feet wet before you dive in fully.
Absolutely. 2 ways to do that. You can hire somebody for a one-off project where it's a flat fee, a certain amount of work needs to be done, or you could bring somebody on for 90 days. You mentioned holiday, temporary employment. You can do things like that. That's how a lot of good people are found. And you don't even have to let them know that they're on a probationary period. Just tell them, I want you for this one project, or maybe I need you for a certain period of time, 60, 90 days, and leave it at that. And if they're good on day 61, 91, you can bring them on for a longer extended period of time.
Well, let's talk about hiring, because that is something that I was never good at. Most of my employees I had when I had my retail store years ago, and I had some good ones and I had some not so good ones. So I can't say I'm so great at the hiring process, but how do you find good people, David? Because you've had more employees than I have.
We were kind of making fun at interns earlier. For the most part, I'm going to agree with everything that we said. A lot of times interns are more work. I had an amazing woman that I worked with for about 3 years. She started as an intern, came in, was just hell-bent on doing a good job, was running circles around my key employee, much better than the key person, and was so good within about a month, we brought the intern on as the key person. You can find people like that. It's very, very similar to what I just mentioned about bringing people in for a temporary job or 30 to 60 days, testing people that way. I think that's good.
But how did you find her?
How do we find her? Asking around. Said, hey, do you know anybody who would be good for this? Somebody who was on the team, said, yeah, I've got one woman. I think she'd be good for it. Her name is Jenny. Worked with her at another company, and I think she'd be up for it.
That's always the best way I've found to hire anybody good, whether it's freelance or not, is to ask for recommendations. And that's something we talked about in our former episode on hiring freelancers, because that's the best one. When you get a personal recommendation, that beats everything in my mind.
You can also reach out to people. Don't let them find you. You find them. If you see somebody who's working hard, don't be afraid to approach them, because people are always looking for new opportunities. And if you see somebody working for somebody else that's doing well, go ahead and approach them. This isn't like marriage, or you're not cheating or anything. You're just offering somebody an opportunity, and he or she can say yes or no. But I've found a lot of people that way. I think it's worth noting that because written communication is so important, Laurel, I always make people write something. I make them write
like
why.
A college essay kind of thing?
Yeah.
Is that what you're doing?
It could be something creative, a little less formal than that, but I want to see their written skills as far as communication goes. Can this person communicate something to me? And it could be, why do you want to work with me? What do you know about me? What do you know about this company? What do you know about what it is that we do? What do you feel about the mission that we're on? Writing is super important to me, as is spoken word communication.
I always find as well, it's really helpful to find employees that are in alignment with your mission. Because if they don't understand what you're trying to do, what you're trying to put out there, what you're trying to sell, they're probably not going to be able to help you as much as somebody who does. And that was always what was important to me, is asking what you said, David, why do you want to work here? Why do you want to be a part of this team and help us do what we do? Because I think that's just a really important element. You want to get people on your team that are excited about it.
Funny story about that. About 10 years ago, I was just getting started with the syndicated radio show. And because of that, I was listening to other radio hosts, listening to them to see how they did things, to see how they would do transitions, to see the energy that they brought, and try to learn from them so I could be better myself. Listening to topics that I was interested on. And as I was listening to a show one day, a woman called in from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, had a question. She was starting something, basically her own business, and was asking for advice on that. This was a business show. And I thought it was so interesting. I went to her and I said, hey, I'm a marketing guy, because they let her plug her stuff. I thought that was very cool of them. So she gave it out online. Reached out to her. Hey, I'm a marketing guy. Might be able to help you. Let's talk. We started the conversation, and that is how Wendy, our right-hand man, woman, both hands, as you said.
The boss.
Wendy of Toronto, Ontario, Canada, started working for me. So there are a lot of ways to find really good people, but I agree with you. You've got to have that common interest. And because of how I found her, we were both listening to this same talk radio show. You knew that commonality was there.
Well, what happens, David, if it doesn't work out? Because when I had that intern, it was such a painful process to call the school, and she was getting credit for this internship, and we had to cancel it. It was just a really sticky situation. So what do you do when you hire the wrong person?
Well, you can just let them work for you and suck you dry until you go out of business. Or
excellent notion.
Or you could fire them. And that, unfortunately, is part of the business. If you're going to hire people, sometimes you're going to have to let people go, and that could be for any number of reasons. I've had it because we've shut businesses down. I've had it because I had an intern outwork the person that I had to let go. I've had it because it's just not a match. You really, really never know until you get in the game with somebody if they're going to work with you. So here are my tips for firing people. Make it quick. No reason to dilly-dally, no reason to think about it weeks on end. Laurel, I don't know if you've ever done that. You and I feel are pretty nice people, and there is a tendency for people that are conscientious of somebody who's working for them to think, oh, I'm providing these people with a salary, they've got family, they've got rent, they've got bills to pay, they quit something to come to me. Maybe we should keep them on a little bit longer. But I've never, ever, ever seen that work in the long run. It's always better when you know somebody shouldn't be there to let them go as quickly as possible. You want to be tactful about it, but understand that it's the best for both parties.
And that's why having a trial period is really great, because you set up, okay, we're going to work together for 90 days and see how it goes. It makes that not as painful, I think.
Yeah, I think it sets expectations. It makes letting somebody go a little bit easier. People being fired usually know that the job isn't a match. Sometimes they're going to find that it is a relief. I know that it was a relief for me every time I was fired. Very scary, but it was a relief because I didn't have to quit. I could move on to something that would be better, a little more closer, a little bit more in alignment with what I wanted. The people that you hire are going to feel the same way, but it's never, ever easy. I think it's really, really tough. I had a job when I was 15 years old. I was scooping ice cream at a Baskin-Robbins. And I remember that the boss, this is the woman who owned the ice cream store, she would never fire you. You would come in, and we had name tags, and there was one that said David. And if the David name tag wasn't there, you would know that you had been fired. And she had done that to several people. And one time, I got a call from my friend. Schedules came out Sunday. He goes, oh, man, you're not on the schedule. Uh-oh. So went in there. Sure enough, name tag's not in there. And she was hoping that I was just going to walk away. She could mail me a check, and she didn't have to deal with that. And that worked for her. But I went in there, and I asked her, I said, what's the deal? How come you fired me? I would have had a better opinion of this woman had she come out to me, had she given me an opportunity to fix what I was doing wrong if I wanted that to happen. Didn't happen like that, so we ended on, I guess, bad terms. Although if I saw her today, I'd probably thank her for doing that. It was just an ice cream store. I was just 15, and it started a long history of me being fired from several jobs after that.
How'd you get fired from Baskin-Robbins real quick before we wrap this up?
Well, long hair, probably digging it through the ice cream.
Were you eating it, David?
I was eating the ice cream. I was pissing customers off, telling them off. Yeah, I wasn't really a great employee. I should have been fired, probably.
There you have it.
But at the same time, I think people do deserve the dignity of having you tell them. Don't just stop paying them or go away, go AWOL. That happens a lot. But let them move on to the next best thing, and that really is best for them. So that's it in a nutshell, how to find people, how to bring them on, and in some cases, how to let them go on to something better. If you have any questions or comments, we are available at redpodcast.com. You can also suggest topics such as this one. This was a listener request. We're happy to take that, redpodcast.com. Are you listening on iTunes? If so, we'd appreciate a review and a rating. Just search for Real Entrepreneur Development on iTunes. Leave us a review. Leave us a rating. That way we will come up more frequently in the iTunes search results. More people will find us, and we will be able to build the Real Entrepreneur Development community. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on the Red Podcast.
You've been listening to Red Podcast, Real Entrepreneur Development. Subscribe today using iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS at redpodcast.com.